Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. In this video, you're going to see a feminist outright lying about Fatimah radiallahu anha. So it all started when a post was posted which says, quote, "I'm divorced and looking for a brother upon Quran and Sunnah." And the meme says, "Are you okay with polygyny?" And the sister says, "Bye." So the meme is making fun of sisters who say, "I'm looking for a brother who's on Quran and Sunnah, and I want to marry him." And the brother says, "Well, are you up for polygamy?" And she says, "Bye," and she runs away. So basically, it's mocking the sisters who say that they're after Quran and Sunnah, but when polygyny is mentioned, they say bye. So it kind of shows a type of hypocrisy. Of course, this triggered a feminist in the comment section where she outright even made a lie, and look what happens when it's confronted. So this feminist, you can see here, that's the Facebook page, they write, I quote, "I don't want to share my husband, and it's my right not to want that. Fatimah, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad, did not want to accept a second wife either. So why are you forcing women to accept it? I have a lot of reasons that I don't want it, and that is between me and Allah." Let me just pause it there. By the way, the reason why Fatimah radiallahu anha rejected a second wife, it was because that was the daughter of Abu Jahl, right? And feminist sisters don't want you to know the context. So Allah Alam, maybe she didn't want any attachment coming from the house of Abu Jahl. She didn't want to deal with Abu Jahl. She probably had nightmares about Abu Jahl, about what Abu Jahl did to her father and so forth. So obviously she did not want anything to do with Abu Jahl's daughter. So that could be a possible reason. But no, the feminists don't want you to know about that. All they want you to know about is Fatimah rejected the idea of a second wife. Again, folks, I'm not saying that as a Muslim woman you can't, if you don't desire to be a co-wife, I'm not saying you can't be one. I mean, if that's what you want to do, you can do. But the fact that they want to impose this idea that they are as good as the women of the believers, the first generation of women. They follow the Sahabi, and they bring up this presumption that what they're doing, where they reject polygamy, is so highly. It's so highly accepted and so righteous, because they try and make it sound so righteous that it's their given right, and they try and relate that to the Prophet's wives, or they try and relate it to the Sahabis, the women, but that isn't the case. That isn't the case. The most righteous of the believers are those who love for their brother for what they love for themselves. That's the righteous. So don't ever try and pollute Fatimah and say, "Oh, she just rejected polygamy because, she rejected Abu Jahl's daughter." That's not an argument. Now let's continue. She says, "I have a lot of reasons that I don't want it, and it is between me and Allah." She says, "I spoke with all those reasons with an imam on a mountaintop." Listen to this part. Apparently she spoke about all these reasons with a random imam at a mountaintop in Mecca. "And I found my reasons logical and understanding why I don't want it." She says, "Better, why can't I mentally handle it?" She says, "So if I find someone, I'll put in my marriage contract, no second wife. Don't force niqab on me. Don't prohibit to wear colors. So don't prohibit me from wearing colors." Right? Listen to this. She says, "Don't force me to wear the niqab." So again, she doesn't want the state to enforce the niqab as well. Don't forget this. Not just her husband. She doesn't want the state, the government, to force niqab. But of course, these feminists have no problem with secular liberalism forcing women and men to dress themselves appropriately and modestly. You can't just do what you want. But of course, they'll accept that the government can force that idea on them. She says, so if I find someone and I will put in my marriage contract no second wife, she says, listen to this part. This is striking. This part, I couldn't believe she wrote this. She said, Fatimah had the second wife thing in her marriage contract, and I shall do that as well. Look at the lie, right? She says, Fatimah had the second wife. Here, look. Fatimah had the second wife thing in the marriage contract, and I shall do the same. So she made a lie claiming that Fatimah radiallahu anha, in her marriage contract, she put down that she does not want Ali radiallahu anhu to have a second wife. Right? This is what she says. Now, I chased her on this. I wrote, can you show us a source where Fatimah radiallahu anha, the daughter of the Prophet, put in her marriage contract that she does not wish to have a second wife in marriage? By the way, I love how these closet feminists love to quote Fatimah's wishes when it comes to refusing a second wife. But you hardly seem to ever hear them quote a hadith where Fatimah radiallahu anha wanted a slave girl to help her around the house from the war beauty. Imagine if Fatimah lived today and wanted the same thing. Imagine how much the feminist sisters would have criticized her for her wishes. This is reported in Sahih Bukhari. Fatimah complained of what she suffered from the hand mill and from the grinding when she got the news that some slave girls of the beauty had been brought to Allah's Messenger. So some slave girls, listen, feminists, listen to this hadith. Slave girls were brought to Allah's Messenger from the war beauty. So when they went and they fought wars and the men died, they killed the men, they took the women as slaves, slave girls. Feminists, listen to this hadith. Slave girls being taken by force and brought to Allah's Messenger. They're captured. They're part of, they're Allah's Messenger's property now. They're his, right? And they get to distribute the slave girls, right? And so look what Fatimah does. The same Fatimah that you use as an example to defend your feminism. She says, the slave girl's beauty had been brought to Allah's Messenger. She went to him to ask for a maid servant, a slave, but she could not find him and told Aisha of her need. So she couldn't find the Prophet Muhammad. So she asked Aisha radiallahu anha, she advised Aisha radiallahu anha to tell the Prophet of her need. When the Prophet came to Aisha to inform him of that, the Prophet came to our house when he had gone to our beds. On seeing the Prophet, we were going to get up, but he said, keep at your places. I felt the coolness of the Prophet's feet on my chest. Then he said, and is telling Fatimah radiallahu anha, shall I tell you a thing which is better than what you asked me? So, and the Prophet ﷺ said, when you go to your bed, say Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest 34 times. All praises for Allah 33 times. Glorified be Allah. This is better for you than what you have requested. So basically what the Prophet was telling Fatimah, who wanted a slave woman in her house. And what happens when there's a slave woman in her house? What happens? Ali radiallahu anhu could have the concubine, it becomes Ali radiallahu anhu's concubine. So Ali radiallahu anh could sleep with this concubine, right? Because it's now living in Ali radiallahu anh's house. So these feminists are trying to say, oh, Fatima didn't want to marry Abu Jahl. Fatima didn't want Abu Jahl's daughter as a second wife. But here Fatima wants a concubine for Ali radiallahu anhu to be in the same house and to cook and clean and help around the house. Right? But the Prophet said to Fatima, do the grinding. Suffer at the hand of the handmill. Go through this suffering. Work. He's telling Fatima to work, basically. Don't worry about a helping hand in the house. Because when you're striving harder and you're working for your house, this is better for you. You're being rewarded. You're going to be rewarded much more than having a slave girl helping you out. Right? So I know the feminists will try and put a spin to this to say, oh, look, but, the Prophet Muhammad's rejected even that, a second, a slave girl. And Fatima was wrong in this. But no, the Prophet didn't, because the Prophet himself had slave girls as well. He had slave girls, he had concubines. I think 2 of them, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it was possibly 2. I could be wrong, but it was definitely minimum something like 2, right? And so, for them to say, oh no, the Prophet was condemning this. No. He just wanted Fatima to have more rewards, to work around the house. And this again, this hadith itself refutes feminists again. Feminists, they always make the argument, oh, why should I have to do anything in the house? I don't have to do anything in the house. My husband has to provide and do the cleaning and do all that stuff. I don't have to do anything. What I do is only optional. This is what the feminists today say. But no, in this hadith, it said the Prophet, she complained to the Prophet that her hands were hurting from grinding. And she wanted help. And the Prophet said, keep doing what you're doing. You're being rewarded by Allah. So this hadith itself refutes feminists on multiple different points. And so look what this feminist says. She says, the Imam told me about Fatima, so I don't have a source and I believe the Imam. So listen, she says she doesn't have a source. She says some Imam told her, because I said, can you show me the evidence, the source, where Fatima, in her contract, in her marriage contract, she refused Ali radiallahu anhu for attempting to take a second wife. Where? She says, the Imam told me about Fatima, so I don't have a source and I believe the Imam. Look. He said it, and it is haram to falsely accuse someone of lying. You just like to smoke, Smoke, moke on me. I already said staying single is also fine for me, so what is your problem? Of course, staying single for feminists isn't a problem. She said earlier that she's prepared to stay single in her house with her cat, and that's what feminism calls to, right? Single parenthood also. This is what it calls to. So look what she uses. She's using anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence to say, oh, some Imam told me on a mountain. And I said, and she also uses emotional blackmailing. She says, quote, she says, and I will not respond to you anymore from now on because you are mean to me and you crush down my self-esteem. Look how they're using emotional blackmailing, right? You make me feel even more worthless, but you don't care, don't you? Allah sendeth down 1% of mercy to his creation, but you clearly do not receive anything of his mercy at all. So notice this, folks. They use emotional blackmailing, emotional boycotting you. They will use these attempts to discredit anything you say by emotionally blackmailing you. I said to her, so let me get this straight. When has Islam advised you to follow anecdotal evidence blindly? And what's even more staggering is the fact that you're spreading misinformation without checking the sources yourself. Shouldn't you know better, being a revert to Islam, that we shouldn't just be trusting any random religious figure? Seems you haven't learned much from your previous religion. I said, I thought you would be much wiser than this, but that's the problem with feminism. They will blindly allow their desires to follow anecdotal evidence, even if there is no source to back it up. And it reminds me of the verse of the Quran, which says in Surah 25 verses 50, but if they do not respond to you, then know that they are only following their own desires. And who is more astray than one who follows his desires without guidance from Allah? Indeed, Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people. She writes back and says, I said I'd rather stay single. If it's true that I must share my husband, what is to say then you accept the fact that I stay single? She says mentally ill people are free and not obligated. So she's now declaring herself mentally ill. And may Allah help her with that if she's mentally ill. And she says she's got autism. But claiming you've got autism is not an excuse for you to say that I'm bullying you when I'm asking you for evidence. If you're going around shamelessly spreading misinformation, I'm going to catch you out for it. And if you're going to go around and turn around and say that's bullying, then you don't have Allah's rahmah and mercy, and you're trying to blackmail me, to try and silence me. And this is a tactic feminists use. They will claim that you are bullying them in order to shut down criticism. And she says, for example, she didn't belong to a previous religion. She says she was raised as an atheist. Well, if you're raised as an atheist, that's even worse. That's even worse. Because it's the atheist community who constantly demand that they want evidence, right? The Christians will say, I believe in blind faith, right? So if you're a Christian, it'd be less severe. The fact that you're an atheist and you're following anecdotal evidence without source is even more peculiar, whether you were even an atheist. So it's funny how she says she was an atheist. What's worse, atheists generally ask for a source and do not just accept anecdotal evidence. If you're a Christian, they tend to follow blind faith. The fact that you were an atheist and brought in a Christian concept of blind faith is even more so peculiar. Go on now, keep using emotional blackmail as feminists tend to do, appealing to being emotionally bullied, when all you had to say is you made a mistake and leave it at that. The fact that you're still trying to give yourself credit shows a form of narcissism, which I pray Allah heals you from. So that's it, folks. That's how you defeat these feminists spreading lies, misquoting traditional Islamic sources, even making lies, following anecdotal evidence, what some Imam said on some mountain of Mecca, spreading these lies without checking the sources and evidences, only to fulfill their desires and enforce their feminism ideology. This is their agenda. And whenever you call them out for it, whenever you tell them produce your source, they then play the victim card. Oh, we're being bullied. Oh, how dare you? Where is Allah's rahmah on you? Where's Allah's mercy upon you?